Hello everyone. Today we have another new episodes and we have another professors and he has a very good understanding and experience and research on the African development, economical development, especially development in Tunisia, and he is very experienced. He working with United Nations and the many good research centers and the research organizations. So hopefully our audience will enjoy today's sessions. Hello, Dr. Zelil. How are you today?
Thank you, Dr. Sharif. Thank you for the invitation. I send you the greetings, my greetings and the greetings of Tunisia, to yourself and to your audience. And I hope we'll have, a nice exchange of
Yes.
you to your
Yes.
audience as well.
Thank you, sir. Sir, I just want to, can you please know about yourself more, and can you please introduce yourself with our audience? And I know you have a very experienced background, so just share with our audience, please.
Sure. Again, my name is JelelEzzine. I am a Tunisian citizen living in Tunisia, and I'm actually today in my house in the capital of Tunisia, which is Tunis. And again, I'm very happy to be with your audience, especially the Malaysian audience and beyond. So I am presently a professor, of higher education, I teach in our engineering school, our best engineering school, systems theory. So my background is really in engineering, okay, and I am also the chairholder of the UNESCO chair on science, technology, and innovation policy. And I will tell you a little bit more how I got into this chair that deals with policy with really an engineering background. That's a slightly odd kind of situation, but it is, of course, feasible. And later on, maybe I will be able to tell you what are the benefits of an engineer and a system theoretician getting into public policy, and in particular, policy related to science, technology, and innovation.
Mhm.
So I've been in higher education, as assistant professor since 1989. So about 30 years of experience in higher education. I taught mainly engineering, courses, and in particular systems theory and cybernetics. And I also was called to take on some, administrative, responsibilities and duties. And I was the, head of pedagogy and curriculum in my engineering school. And by the way, that's the same engineering school where I got my engineering degree. So it's something very special to me to be able to go back, and be a faculty as well as an administrator in my engineering school. So I was, as I said, in charge of the curriculum and pedagogy in my school, as well as deputy director of the school, and that was for about 2 to 3 years. And after that, I went and joined our Ministry of Higher Education and Scientific Research. And that was really a wonderful experience of about 8 years, where I took care. I was the director of university research for about 2 to 3 years, and that I had to evaluate as well as fund our university laboratories, research laboratories in all areas. And at that time, we had about 600 or so of them. Then I was called to be the director, and the first director actually, of what is called today our Directorate of Graduate School and Research. So I was called to actually design and implement and follow up the implementation of all policies related to launching graduate schools in Tunisia. And that was really a very, very rich experience, especially with my team and the colleagues that, of course, helped me in that very, very important task. As a matter of fact, in our Tunisian universities, which is quite a special situation. If we have time, we can talk about it later on. But I will just say that for a long while, graduate school wasn't really anchored into the university structure. There was only some kind of a legislation that allowed graduate students and master's degree as well as PhD, degrees to proceed and have master students as well as as well as PhD students as well as graduates. But we really needed within the Bologna process, as you well know, to anchor the graduate school into the overall university architecture, starting, of course, from Bachelor of Science and then all the way to the PhD level by linking all of that process coherently, following the, how would I say, the standards of the Bologna process. So I'm very happy and honored to have really crowned, if I may say so, the Tunisian university structure with its top level degrees. And during that process, after designing and as well as implementing the necessary policies, including the needed legislations, we had actually to launch, according to this legislation, our graduate schools all over Tunisia. And after that process, we were able to launch we launched actually 37, graduate schools in all of our universities in Tunisia. And as a matter of fact, these 37, and this was done in 2007. Today, the same 37, graduate school are still up and running. And I would have liked to see more, change because, about 13 years is a bit too much. And I would have liked to see those who took over this directorate to actually, go beyond this step and maybe have new, graduate schools. After that, and after this wonderful experience, I was called to head the General Directorate of International Cooperation. So, in this duties or this responsibilities, of course, allowed me to have a very wide and horizontal understanding of the sector of higher education and scientific research in Tunisia, be it legislations, regulations, institutions, researchers and faculty and student, etc. And during 4 years, I was called to head this very, very important department where I had to run, the bilateral agreements that were already signed with other countries, or, add some new countries, to our collaboration portfolio, if I may say so. And I remember I had the chance and the honor, to actually launch cooperation with India, with South Africa, modify, to high extent our cooperation with Germany. And these are just a couple of examples where I really had to lead my team and the ministry in gathering more and more momentum in our cooperation, because as you well know, when dealing with research, one cannot just do research in his own or her own corner. research and knowledge is spread all over the world. And if one needs to really, be abreast of what's going on, international cooperation is a fundamental pillar, of running an efficient, national research program. So that gave me 10 years of experience as, in the administration, as a top civil servant. And after I walked out of that 10 years experience, that was in 2013, and during that, of course, as the DG of International Cooperation, I had to travel quite a bit to many countries and meet many colleagues and get to learn quite a bit about, higher education, research in particular, and national innovation systems in general. And I discovered that, first of all, in my country, Tunisia, the region, as well as in developing countries, especially, also least developed countries, that there was a lot to be done. And these countries were lacking a lot of capacity and capabilities to really harness the gray, how would I say it, power of their population and of their human resources to really leverage science, technology, and innovation as a means of development and of further, welfare. So after making that observation, I really thought of my role as a citizen in my country and as a global citizen, on the planet as a whole. In the sense that I thought whatever I was doing as a researcher before really becoming, an administrator, I was doing some kind of some esoteric, let me say, research, and when I was publishing my papers, I was happy if a dozen of people would read my papers. And I thought, and when I really discovered, many of the challenges that Tunisia was undergoing, as well as other similar countries, I thought maybe I could invest my time in something more useful, especially to my country and especially to developing countries. And after really reviewing a bit that experience, I came to the conclusion that many, many important capabilities were missing to these countries. That means, lack of development wasn't there by chance, but there were really some important, reasons. And without really solving or apprehending some of these reasons and obstacles, actually, it would be impossible for these countries to develop. All right. Of course, there were many, many important obstacles. But one of the key obstacles, as far as my experience somehow taught me, was the lack of know-how, expertise, and capabilities in public policies in general. Okay, these countries were quite weak, in designing their policies, implementing them, and reviewing them and adapting them to their context and reality and level of development. So it's very much like in a country, it's very much like having an airplane or a car, and not really, and that airplane is full of passengers, but whoever was supposedly going to fly the airplane or drive the car didn't have his or her driver license, and that's of course was a very important discovery for me. Of course, many other people certainly knew about it, but to me it was very important to learn that, on the field, So I decided to really go and plunge as a professor in a new academic field, which is, the field of public policies. But public policies that deal mainly with science, technology, and innovation. And that was mainly motivated by 2 or 3 reasons. The first reason is that in Tunisia, we don't have really natural resources. So we were not going to get rich by selling oil or, what have you. The second thing is that, I could see that most of our policies were not really designed with the right rigor and the required tools and with the follow-up required for these policies to really give the impact that was looked for. So policies were designed very hastily. They were mainly designed because of political pressures, because of some social unrest or challenges, and consequently they were done very, very quickly. So I decided to plunge into this area, and I launched in 2015 the first master's degree in this area that I called Engineering and Technology Policy. And that was quite challenging because, as you well know, public policy is a topic that is usually taught in political science departments and not in engineering schools. So it had to be designed in a way so it fits the engineering school. And it was also one motivation in the sense that I wanted to introduce the rigor of engineering school, of engineering tools and engineering science in the design of policy. And that project was very, very much welcomed by UNESCO. And they encouraged me actually to go for this, UNESCO chair on science, technology, and innovation policy. And that's how I got, to chair, this institution for the last 4 years or so. So I feel like a new PhD student who's discovering a new field and learning a lot, getting to discover new people, new challenges. And I love it. And I feel like it would be hopefully, of impact to my country, to the region, and to countries similar to Tunisia.
Yes, thank you, sir. I have a specific question because you come up with a very interesting idea. Even I personally, I do a lot of research and I engage with policy making and these things about the like developing nations' economical development aspect and how developing nations come up with their science and technology policy and policy research. My specific objective is that in that situation, in COVID-19 situations, how you manage different kind of policy in Tunisia and how it gonna helpful for the local community.
Well, this is a $1 million question, and of course, every country is struggling, to develop economically and of course socially, and that hasn't been easy. If we speak of the last 8 years or so, right after the Second War, only a handful of countries were able to really develop and become rich countries. Maybe 10%, 10 to 11 countries made it. For the last 20 years, no other country was able to make it really. So development is very, very challenging, issue. So that's one thing. The second thing is that, unfortunately, and since the Second War, the international community, with a lot of influence from powerful countries, came up with or tried somehow to convince us that there is a silver bullet, that will really help all countries join, the club of the rich ones. And somehow, not somehow, I mean, that way of, and I'm talking of the Bretton Woods institutions, as you know, and what comes with it as the Washington Consensus. Okay, most of our countries, when they are in difficulties, and especially they are in need of loans, they go to these institutions, be it the IMF or the World Bank, and to get loans in order to jumpstart their economy. And by doing so, of course, the donors have their conditions, and these conditions, about half a dozen or seven in this Washington consensus, tried to help these people and apply the scheme everywhere. And this was really not a successful procedure. As a matter of fact, after 8 years and after the numbers I just gave you, it turned out that this Washington consensus wasn't really the right way to go. But many, many countries had no choice but to follow, their donors and apply, the rules of the donors. Here there are two maybe rules that I would like to insist on, that I feel like were not beneficial to countries like ours. And of course, here I'm talking as JelelEzzine, professor, and I'm taking advantage of my academic freedom to say so. So I'm not saying that this is the position of my country or the institution like UNESCO I belong to. This is, the academician JelelEzzine who's trying to have a critical view on development, and especially how it was run by the multinational institutions. So the first element, going back to the Washington consensus, was the role of the government. Okay, the role of the government. In the Washington consensus, the idea was to keep the government as small as possible and as far as possible from, the economy, the wheeling and dealing, and especially the market. Okay, that was the first thing. The second is to really make of the market really this ingenious mechanism that will always find the optimal solution to whatever economic ill there was in the country. And a third element, the Washington consensus and the IMF and the World Bank in particular didn't, let me put it in a diplomatic manner, didn't really encourage a country like ours to have a contextualized industrial policy. As a matter of fact, if you look at the many reports written by these institutions and similar ones, they are more talking about the inconveniences of this kind of industrial policy than really their advantages. Knowing that the only countries that made it to the club of the rich, and we even call them the industrialized countries. So no country made it to the industrial club, to the rich club, without developing their industry. But of course, here I'm talking of industry and in a wide range, in the sense that it brings in agriculture, it brings in manufacturing as well as services. Okay, so it's not just manufacturing. So, and these comments I'm making, I kind of experienced them when I was, in the ministry, and when I really started getting interested in the development of Tunisia and asking the question, why aren't we developing? Why isn't Tunisia developing? We have a very, very strong education system in general. We have a very good higher education system. We have plenty of researchers. We publish very, very well. We are actually the first in the continent when you normalize the number of papers by GDP or by the demography. Okay, and we are investing quite a bit of money in that system. But unfortunately, the impact of these dynamics on growth, let's say, okay, on growth, is to me, not that important or not as expected, if sometimes not negative. So these are the questions that really pushed me to understand, why is it so? And when I got, into the literature, which is huge literature, and it's not, and it's quite often contradictory, because it depends very, very much on the context of the country and its level of development. It's very important to know the context of the country and to know at what stage that country is due regard to development, as well as, of course, its comparative advantages. Okay, what does the country has, where it feels strong enough so that really it can make a difference and jumpstart its, development process. So, as a matter of fact, a year and a half ago, the country launched a call for proposal for research, and for the first time, the call for proposal somehow was framed within, how would I say it, priorities, national priorities. And I was able to submit, a project that was accepted, luckily, and I'm very happy with that. And indeed, the key topic of that project was, how to design STI policies that are contextualized. Okay, and that's, to me, extremely important. I give you one example, for instance. Everybody talks about how much a country invests in its research and development. What is the percentage of GDP that a country is supposed to invest, in R&D? And you find this basically in all, the reports that are written about innovation. Okay, and of course, the recommendation is you have to invest at least 1%, if not more, and the more, the better. So this became like, the rule. It became the rule, and it was even, I would say, imposed, forced into very poor countries where poverty is so high, where people are really struggling, to eat, struggling to go to school, struggling with their health challenges. You really try to push them to invest at least 1% of their GDP in R&D. Okay, that's one side. We were doing something reasonably well, as I told you earlier. We were publishing quite well, but there wasn't much impact on growth. So I was saying, what's going on? Then you hear of, the Swedish paradox, the European paradox, and, this paradox became, from Swedish, it became European. What is that paradox? Researchers found that, and policymakers found that there was no strong correlation between investing a lot in R&D and in GDP growth. So you see, this investment in R&D, to me, was one of the questions that really brought me into this arena. Okay, as a matter of fact, when you read many of the introductory books or papers talking about innovation, and I'm sure yourself and many of your audience saw it, you see always this exponential graph, that correlates investment in R&D and GDP. Okay, so you find in the x-axis you have investment in R&D, and on the y-axis you had, the GDP, and that was a very, very clear exponential. Of course, on the right end you had all the rich countries, and on the left corner you had all the poor ones. And of course, the first reaction is, oh, wow, if I invest a lot in research, I'm going to have a much bigger GDP. And when you try to look at that piece of correlation statistics carefully and with a critical mind, you think, shouldn't I read it the other way around? Aren't countries who are rich enough and who were able to become rich have enough money to actually invest in R&D? But you don't see this reading in the literature of innovation. They only somehow, either directly or implicitly, make you believe that the more you invest, the better GDP you're gonna get. And the question here, okay, when you have money, when you are the United States, when you are Finland, when you are South Korea, you are rich enough and you have quite enough of money so that you really invest. And they should do so, and growth theory supports that. Okay, certainly yourself heard of Romer, the guy who had the Nobel Prize in 2018 about indigenous growth. Okay, and that's one, empiric proof of Romer's indigenous growth. But when you go to the left corner and you have very, very poor countries, okay, how can you really, make them invest the very little money they have in R&D while they have tremendous challenges, in feeding their people and having a social, security for their people, etc. Okay, so this question brought me to really do more research and try to understand much better, this one important element of research. And I came up with some conclusions. Okay, I will share with you maybe a couple or three of them. First of all, you cannot really deal with research by itself and decoupled from the overall innovation system and, in a global fashion, the economic system. Okay, because like in Tunisia, and that's a good lesson, but it's a bad, you should not do it, you should not invest a lot in research while there is no bridge between the researchers or the research institutions and the socio-economic world.
Impact. Okay.
Exactly. Because, you can have the best research ever, but if that research doesn't become implemented as innovation and go to the market to create, growth, it's really very much like you are throwing money from the window. Okay, so that's one thing. And then Tunisia, that is our situation. The link between the research world and the socio-economic world is not there. So we kept pumping in money, but we didn't pay attention to really linking these two subsystems of the national innovation system. And another also issue is that it's not beneficial to pump money into the research system without having priorities that stem from your socio-economic challenges, and engage and incentivize researchers to really do oriented research so that they can solve your socio-economic challenges. And that automatically, is part of the bridge that I'm talking about. Okay? The third element, always around this issue, is that we in the underdeveloped world, or developing world, to be politically correct, is that we have some kind of, let me say, complex towards technology and science. And we have tendency to push too hard towards STEM education, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Because we thought that if we have a lot of, engineers and mathematicians, of the sudden we're gonna become developed country. That's also not right. Okay, Tunisia has done it. For the last 40 years or so, we have really pumped our education system to create so many engineers, scientists, and what have you. But development didn't follow. For the same reason that I explained before concerning publications. So we have top indicators as far as the number of publications. We have top indicators as far as our, STEM graduates, but nothing follows, on the economic side. So it's very, very important to have a systemic view of the national system of innovation, or of the socio-economic system that is supposed to be, the engine of growth. We cannot, in our policies that are supposed to really empower, that system to give us growth, to look at it in a dislocated manner. We cannot just treat finances by themselves, education by itself, research by itself, industry by itself, and really initiate policies for each sector separately. What is fundamental in this situation is to really have a horizontal coordination instrument that makes sure that all the policies are harmonized and they are polarized towards the same aim and vision. That is highly lacking in developing countries, because we are too much interested, and in a hurry to get things done, while really going and having some like of microscopic actions without understanding the vital value of coordination and of having really an orchestrated whole that somehow is polarized towards the same goals and vision. In our countries, you find that ministries, each minister and each ministry is working in silos, okay, without any coordination. And, that is the whole story behind, one of the key stories at least, behind development. You need to have a vision, a collective vision of where your country you want it to be in 10, 20, or 30 years. What are, your objectives, and strategies, and then give each sector and each ministry its own roles, but within an orchestrated, system. This is highly missing, because, and this is, an important conclusion of this part of this topic, is that, as I said, we really train technicians, scientists, engineers, even doctors, or even lawyers, but we really don't train experts that are the ones that will play the maestros, if I may say so, what I call them the maestro. You need these, experts that are capable of integrating the overall system and create the synergy between all the subcomponents, so that all the system moves in the same direction with the right speed, within, of course, the means that the country has. We have tendency to miss that part very, very much. We don't miss it just because our decision makers or politicians are not good enough to understand that. There is a lot of truth in this. But also, going back to the Washington Consensus, going back to the World Bank, going back to the IMF and to the OCDE, they also make us believe that what they are doing in their own countries is good for us as well. And that's wrong. It is correct in principle, but it's in dissonance with the level of development. Because if you go back, for instance, and see how America developed and became the powerful country in the world, okay, you will see that America had to really develop its agricultural system a couple of centuries ago, and then shift progressively to more, industry and technology-driven kind of economy. So they have, and all of the country went through that path. But when they somehow come to us to help us, develop, they have tendency automatically to suggest, and to advise us to do whatever they are doing right now. And this more than 1% at least, or more than 1% of R&D investment from GDP is an iconic of the situation. Okay, so this is why my advice to developing countries is that, first of all, to fully understand our context, to really understand what are our, comparative advantages, and to have a good knowledge of what other countries, those who succeeded and those also who didn't. And then, after coming up with the collective vision, coming up with, a social contract, the right strategies to get to that vision, then design and orchestrate the needed policies to steer the system towards that vision. And that doesn't need only engineers. That doesn't need only scientists. That also needs lawyers. That also needs people who understand what innovation is, what entrepreneurship is, when are they needed, where they are needed, how to really, empower them so that they can be part of the solution and not the problem. See, for instance, in Tunisia, we were so much into our education system, which was a good approach, that today we have 300,000 university graduates who are jobless. So we really lost on two levels. We have unemployment, and when you say youth unemployment, it's unrest, okay, and very difficult psychological situation for these people and their families. But all the money that we had to spend to get these youth to graduate, and all of a sudden we have this really brain power that we cannot take advantage of because we didn't have a holistic vision of things, and we didn't develop our knowledge economy so that these knowledgeable people can bring in their know-how and contribute to the development of their country and not become actually an obstacle.
Yes. Sir, I have a specific question for you. This is very interesting discussions, and me and my audience have keen interest about the developing nations economy and the policy applications. Besides that, even though Mohammed Shoail and he wants to know about the science, technology and innovation situations in Tunisia and how actually Tunisia progress right now. You already explained about the Tunisian education system, and side by side, Tunisia has challenges for Tunisian young people, has challenge for getting job. But my question is that one of the interesting aspects you discuss about research centers and the policymakers, they must need to be social economic context. They must need to contribute based on social and economic context. My issue is that even in I know many developing nations, they are economic wise, they are developing step by step, they are developing, but how they convert, they can more integrated, what's the process, they can more integrated with research, with better policy, and when they like integrated their industry based on the economy and policy related research, how they can restructure their economy. My objective is that how they restructure the economy. Yeah.
Excellent question. And that's actually one of the key issues I try to work on with my students in my laboratory and my colleagues, and within also this research project I got lately, as well as the UNESCO chair. Before answering that question, and it's part of the reply also, I would like to insist on the vital importance of social science research and humanities. In our countries, we have tendency not to give enough importance to these, sectors of science and of knowledge. They are very, very important in trying to really follow up and understand the impact of science and technology and industry on society, and contextualizing it and really help, orient that effort. So we really should not, forget that important part. And also, we should not at all forget in education, such as in primary, secondary, and even higher education, to bring in enough social sciences and humanities, because, that's vital to bring up a citizen that understands what's going on in the country. Now, back to your question of how to really orchestrate, the research agenda and activities with, the development agenda, such as industrial policy and political economics in general. Okay, that's a very good question, and many people have tendency to ask that question, and it's difficult to answer it when we limit our focus on these 2 points. That's why I highly insist on really taking a eye view on the topic. Remember, early on, I spoke of a vision. You need to, if you don't know where you want to go, what you want to be, what kind of society you want to have, okay, you won't be able to really understand what research to make, what are the challenges that you are facing, what kind of industry you should really empower, and what have you. So it's fundamental that the community, that a nation, a country, decides collectively on where they want to be, or where they want to have their children and the children of their children to be, let's say, in 3-4 decades. So there is this foresighting exercise, which is extremely important, and it has to be done collectively, because later on, you're going to ask the people to do whatever it takes, such as sacrifices, to get there. So if a citizen wasn't, or a community didn't take part in the foresighting exercise of what they want to be, they won't really be engaged in the hard work that has to be done to reach that point. Okay? So that's the one thing. What kind of a country you want? The second thing, okay, if you want to get to that country, what are the pillars that have to be built so that we can get, what are the fundamental pillars that will really sustain that kind of a country you would like to build in 3 or 4 decades? And once you have that, then you come up with strategies, okay, that will help you, to get there. Let me be more specific and give you a simple example so that you and your audience understand what I'm trying to say. Let's assume, and that should be actually the goal of every country today, that in 2050, we would like Tunisia would like to have 0% CO2 emissions. Okay. So I understand very well that I would like to be, carbon free in 2050. Whatever I have to do, should somehow integrate that element in my strategies. So if I want to industrialize, I have to make sure that my industries are green. Okay. If I want to generate energy because it's needed for my industry, I have to make sure that I minimize fossil fuel consumption, as well as have, a transportation sector that is as green as possible, etc. So if you know that also you need green electrons, if you need to really produce electrical energy from, let's say, photovoltaics, okay, then you say, wow, do I have the capacity and the capabilities, to really empower and sustain such a sector? And you go back to your research centers and your higher education institutions, and you will certainly find some elements of that, probably not enough. And then finally you say, I need to have a strategy where I should produce, green energy. And of the sudden, that decision, which is one of the pillars that will get you to your vision, will become an important, component of the strategies and the policies you are designing. Okay, so of the sudden, for instance, in Tunisia, I would like to see Tunisia in 2050, if not before, to be zero CO2 emitter, and consequently, we need to have, a 100% renewable energy in Tunisia. So to achieve that, you need to build. First of all, you need to conceptualize and design that ecosystem and then implement it. And to implement it, you need to have the right legislation, regulations, and what have you. And you need also to have the right, human resources. So once you know that you need 0% CO2, then you decide that you have to have 100%, renewable energies, and then you need to have the capacity, the human capacity to run the show. And the human capacity, it's not only scientists, it's not only engineers, but you will also need lawyers who understand what does it mean to have renewable energies, what is the needed legislation, how to apply the legislations, how to write, contracts, either internally or with international partners. You need also, policymakers who are fully trained within that framework. So it's not just having an engineer or just having a scientist that knows how to really deal with these issues. To become actually a 100% renewable energy producer, you need to build the whole system. And the whole system is not just technicians, I mean scientists and engineers. It's much, much, much beyond that. All the way to, as I said, lawyers, all the way to financial people who understand the finances of renewables, all the way to decision makers, okay, as well as scientists in social sciences and humanities, to integrate that in their everyday wheeling and dealing, so that they diffuse, this idea, this vision, through their students, through their writings, so that the whole society is behind the project. Okay, and that automatically will condition how the politicians will actually act, how the politician will decide about their programs, and how the politicians will get elected. Okay, because they understand the country is polarized and wants to go one way or the other, and consequently he has to empower these dynamics and be part of it and not against it.
Yes.
But of course, I mean, I have to make a remark. This is theoretically very simple. Okay, there is a humongous gap between theory and practice, because when there is a lot of vested interest in every country, there are a lot of lobbies, there are a lot of powerful institutions here and there who work to really keep their advantages, okay? And they will do everything they can to actually stop or block this kind of a transition. Because, all the people in the fossil fuel industry, for instance, would not like what I am saying, okay? So we need very, very smart, and sometimes maybe allow me to say between quotes, shrewd and progressive policies to bring in, these people, this vested interest, and make them part of the dynamics, so they don't feel they will be losing everything they built for years and decades. They have also to be winners within that dynamics. And that's where really the genius of politicians and policymakers comes into play. Decision making and policy making is not an automatic, process. It's a very subtle. It's a very complex, and we need really the capacity. And again, I insist on saying contextualized capacities. When you have a problem and you fail to find a solution, picking up the phone and calling the best guy in the States or Germany or Japan to come and help you out is not the best solution. But by saying that, I'm not saying I'm against cooperation. By no means. We have to learn from other countries. We have to cooperate with other countries. We have to build partnerships with other countries, because finally, if the development of each country doesn't contribute to the development of humanity as a whole, it won't be, development. That's how I see it. And
yes.
Here,
Yes, sir.
I would like to say something very quickly. I know that we don't have much time.
No, I can continue. I just want to take question from audience, if you
Sure.
allow me. Yes, sir, there is a specific question from audience. I also have a question. Araf Mehraj, he's asking that how actually technology as well as startup working inside of Tunisia, especially Tunisia education sector. Humaira Tanzila, she said, hello sir, thank you for your time, and it's surely a very informative session for us. So it's mean the audience is very happy. I have a specific issues. My question is that, sir, you are describing very dynamic method, very important part of the economy, and what I always try to understand from the developing economy, you are trying to give them strategy, and this is actually priceless strategy you are sharing today. My question is that, like, you are talking about green technology, you are talking about carbon emissions and the global warming issues. My question is that, like, how actually developing nations they can negotiate with the developed nations based on this carbon emissions, global warmings, based on their better policy, based on your better intellectual ability, based on their I want to say political diplomacy, how they can make it happen.
Thank you for this question. Let me answer very quickly the question from the lady or from your audience about the startups and entrepreneurs and what have you. You see, when you have an excellent seed, let's assume that you, Sharif, or me, or whoever from your audience has an excellent seed and sow that seed flowering somewhere, okay? And you come with that seed and you plant it in your garden, okay? And for some reasons, that seed doesn't bloom. Nothing comes out of the ground. What would you say? Is it because of the seed? They gave you maybe a wrong seed? Or is it because of the environment, which is the ground in which you planted your seed?
Mm-hmm.
what I'm trying to say here is that an entrepreneur who launched his own startup or her own startup, if you don't have the right environment, you might have a genius. You might have the Malaysian Bill Gates or the Tunisian Bill Gates, okay? And in Tunisia, if we clown Bill Gates 100 times, I don't think Bill Gates will be big.
Exactly. Brilliant. Because same thing. When I discuss with the developed nations, I said that it's not you are not in Silicon Valley. So when the people build up their business in Silicon Valley, they have environment. The developing nations, they have to build it, and that is the strategy you are making. Yeah,
Exactly. So that's why I'm saying the holistic view of really designing and implementing an environment that allows everyone to contribute is fundamental. And that requires really a deep understanding and a bird's eye view of things, and especially the interlinkages and the process going on in a system such as the National Innovation System. Many times, people usually, and decision makers and politicians seldomly have that understanding. So it's, as I said earlier, if you have a 747 and you have somebody on the seat of the captain, it's not because I am in the seat of the captain that I will be able to fly the 747. Okay? And many of our country, just because somebody becomes a minister, that he starts thinking, he's going to do whatever is needed, to get things going. Well, it's not true. For instance, in Tunisia, for the last 10 years, and even before, to tell you the truth, since the 80s, because we didn't have people who really understood exactly what was going on. And also their objective might not have been to truly develop the country, that we didn't develop. And that brings another issue, which is the institutional setup of the country, the political landscape, and the motivation of the leadership, and the lack or the presence of political engagement. That's why early on I spoke of, the political economy dimension, and that's really the bridge between the economy and the political institution in a country. Now I go back to your question, which is fundamental to me, and that's what I was trying to say early on before you stopped me. So I'm very glad that you asked that question. You see, humanity really is at a crossroad, Sharif. I mean, it's not. I'm a very optimistic man. Okay, what keeps me going is my optimism, and I am not at all a fatalist, but I am a realist. Okay, today humanity is undergoing an extremely challenging time, and as a matter of fact, COVID-19, okay, is a testimony of the difficult times humanity is undergoing. As a matter of fact, me and with some of my friends all over the world, we are really afraid. I mean, we are concerned about the fate of humanity in a couple of centuries. You see, the neoliberalism that started, and that got really kicked in strongly since the 1980s, really initiated the havoc on the planet, and we have today, the climate change and the global warming as being the key anthropogenic consequence of our ill-doing. Okay, that ill-doing is due to the greed of the 1%. And if we really don't solve this problem, Mother Earth is only one and unique ship. If it goes, we all go. Okay? Consequently, this is a call. This is a clarion call from me, to humanity as a whole and to the leadership of this planet, okay, to really look into this problem urgently and with as much engagement as possible. we cannot continue on the same path we've been on since the Second War. We cannot allow this capitalism, hedonistic, I call it hedonistic capitalism, to continue. Inequalities that we are seeing today, that the 1%, okay, has more wealth than 50% of all of humanity, is nonsense, okay? And the poverty that we are having today, people living in agony, because they are in extreme poverties, because they are hungry, because they are sick, because they are uneducated, because they don't have water, is unacceptable. It's not human to really allow our humanity to have such a big chunk of it living in such conditions. So, and there is no solution. There is no other planet parked, besides Earth. There is only one and unique Earth, and we call it Mother Earth, because indeed it's our mother. The solution, and even the SDGs that I respect tremendously, and it's a good beginning, very much like the MDGs. But we had 15 years experience of the MDGs trying to really eradicate poverty. It didn't happen. Now we are launching, and we launched 5 years ago, the SDGs. It's not working. As a matter of fact, the few days ago, a report was launched and by the UN, and it really is screaming very loudly that poverty is not getting better, that the SDGs have a lot of inconsistencies within them, albeit they're really positive, let's say, motivations. So with these inequalities, if we keep on having these inequalities between countries and within countries, as they are today, that's really, a clarion of apocalyptic end for humanity. And there is no other way of solving this problem but redistribute the wealth on a reasonable fashion so that all of humanity will live in dignity. Okay? And to do so, there is no other solution but to bring the poorest of humanity to a dignifying level of living. And that has a price, because if we bring the poorest people to that level, we need maybe 1 or 2, if not 3 more planets. But we don't have them. We have finite resources. So the only and unique way of doing it, which is extremely challenging, is to bring the 1% and the richest ones to a lower level of, welfare. So that all of humanity will live within, an interval of well-being that is acceptable and dignifying for everybody and sustainable for Mother Earth. And even I would claim for it to be regenerative for planet Earth, because planet Earth is sick today. Okay,
Yes.
we are very much like viruses who are attacking it, and it is really having a high fever. So we either really tame our existence and live in harmony with our planet, or it will spit us out and it will continue much better without us than with us.
Yes, sir. Sir, there is a thank you for your very interesting discussions. There is some one audience responses I'm taking from her. She is Hosne Ara Firdaus. She said actually from Tunisian government how actually investors getting assistance, administrative assistance. This is her questions. I have a very basic fundamental question is that now the world has many challenges, economical challenges, health system, arena we have a lot of challenges. Healthcare system we have problem, education we have problem. Even today they are asking that yes, education system has problem. We have many challenges right now. But my question is that how developing economy under the UN umbrella, how they can work together for your strategy, better policy, better industrial developments, and better sustainable economical developments. Now, this is my last questions to you. Yeah.
I will answer the lady first. Yes, the government is trying to really give as much support to the entrepreneurs, especially the youth, and launching their startups and what have you. While this is really a commendable way of doing things, first of all, it's not enough. Second of all, and that's what's really of concern to me, I am afraid in these kind of situations when governments start talking about entrepreneurship and really encouraging youth to go and launch their own businesses, which I fully support, is not enough. Why? Because many governments are doing that so that they are throwing their own responsibilities on the shoulders of the citizen and specifically the youth. Okay, it's not, and if you really encourage me to launch my own business and hire others with me, make sure that the environment within which I'm going to evolve is ripe enough and empowering enough so that I can succeed in doing that. But that you really throw me in the North Sea while knowing that I am not a good, swimmer, and you ask me to fight 30 meters high waves, I don't think that's really the right procedure. So yes, for entrepreneurship, yes, for youth to start their startups, but yes for the government to really, empower them with the right environment. Now I go back to your question, Sharif. You see, when we are underdeveloped countries, we are so much under the pressure of our underdevelopment, poverty, education, as you said, industry, and what have you, that decision makers really get drowned in these problems, and they become, firefighters. All right, and very, very seldomly, if ever, they really raise their heads and try to understand, their situation with the outside world, be it the developed world or the South, or its relationship with the global governance system, which is the UN in this case. Okay? Unfortunately, developing countries, because they are playing this role of firefighters, they don't have enough time nor capacity to really understand and integrate these complexities within their wheeling and dealing, and put the pressure on all of this, on all of these forces to actually, get their countries going and save humanity. Because developing countries are trying to develop, that's how I understand it, not only to become like Finland or France or Germany or the United States, but really to get to a sustainable level of development where everybody can live in dignity with the planet Earth, in good shape. So, but unfortunately, when you go to developing country, not only you don't find people who have the expertise in public policies or in governance or in administration or management, they also lack tremendously the know-how as far as trade. How do you really sign your trading, agreements with this country, or how to deal with the WTO when a country somehow infringes, your agreements? We don't have that knowledge, and that knowledge is very, very complex. And you need also to do research in that knowledge. Another area also of interest, the UN and developing countries are pushing developing countries to really go for the SDGs. Okay, fine. Still, the SDGs have a lot of problems, but that's not the moment to talk about that. But we need funds. We need funding, to really be able to implement the SDGs. But the whole world tells the developing country, no, do it yourself, or at best, do it in cooperation with the private sector. Well, first of all, the private sector, that's not its a duty. And when the government doesn't have really the right means, how it's going to do it? Knowing that on the international level, for example, tax evasion is humongous. A lot of means that could have been used and leveraged by developing countries to develop and go and follow the SDGs, are being siphoned out because of tax evasion. And when rich people, go through this unfortunate tax evasion, they put them in heavens, in fiscal heavens. But fiscal heavens are in developed countries and everywhere in the world, and the UN and the multilateral institutions are not doing anything for that. So one way they tell you need to really go and implement the SDGs. They don't give you any financial support, but at the same time they watch an outflow, of financial means from your country, and they don't do anything about it. And this is really the case for most of developing and least developed countries. So that's why the global governance is really called to really take its responsibilities and restructure itself in a way that things work for everybody and not just for an elite. Because again, I say it, we are on Mothership Earth. When Mothership Earth crashes, everybody will crash.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So thank you, sir. This is actually very informative and nice discussion, even from our audience, Humaira, Firdaus, Mohammad Sohail Rana, everybody, Araf Mehraj, everybody appreciate your discussions. And this is actually brilliant discussion. And we are actually working WTE Forum, World Talent Economy Forum. We have our research organization, Asia Research and Development Institutions. In Malaysia, we have organization Al Noor Research Institute, Sarhadia Barhat. So we love to learn, we love to collaborate, and we want to do a proper strategic thing. So how you enlightened today's sessions. So as a research fellow, if you give us guidelines and if you give us advice, always World Talent Economy Forum with you, and with your brilliant effort, maybe we can contribute for the human being and we can change human lives. Thank you, sir, for your very informative, very strategic and very clear discussion. Thank you for your valuable time and support.
Thank you very much, Sharif, for the invitation. I enjoyed spending this time with you and with your audience. And I wish you all the best. And I wish humanity also a wonderful, long future.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Even we arrange different kind of policy discussion. Future, we're going to invite you for policy discussion and different kind of debating. Thank you for your time. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Yes.